The Face in the Corner. This deleted episode was never aired on television. It all began like any ordinary sunny day. In a quiet children's room, Peppa and George were playing. Everything was calm. They were building a tower of blocks, just like always. But then something caught Peppa's attention. She stopped and looked toward the corner. In the corner of the room, near the ceiling, a blurry face appeared. It was barely visible, like a shadow, but its expression was cold, lifeless. It stared at Peppa, as if studying her every move. Peppa froze, unable to look away. The shadows on the walls began to shift and twist, as if they were alive. Her heart started beating faster. Something was wrong. Something was there that shouldn't have been. She stepped forward, trying to understand what was happening, but the face didn't vanish. It became clearer. Now it was right in the top corner of the room. Peppa felt the air grow colder. Darkness began pulling her toward that corner. At that moment, Daddy Pig entered the room. He looked at Peppa and George with surprise, but his voice sounded strange, low and distorted.
What are you two doing here?
Daddy Pig walked toward the corner where the face had just been, but now it was gone. Instead, the shadows became more sinister, and the air around them thickened. He touched the corner, and something horrifying began. His face started to change. His eyes darkened. His arms grew long and misshapen. His voice turned into a deep echo from the dark corner.
Now I can play again.
Peppa and George tried to back away, but the shadows had already filled the room, and the walls began to ripple. A strange, unnatural music filled the air, making everything around them feel alive. They tried to escape, but the door was locked. The room began fading into darkness, and the music grew louder, swallowing them whole. We can't get out, Peppa whispered, her voice consumed by the shadows. Darkness swallowed everything. The shadows on the walls grew unimaginably large, and the sound of the music became unbearable.
Peppa and George stood in a void, surrounded by the shadow. In that dark nothingness, they realized they couldn't leave. Everything around them was part of the emptiness. The music never stopped. Are we here forever? Peppa whispered. At that moment, the music stopped. Silence. And they disappeared. Gone. Forever.
Peppa and George spent the weekend at the country house. While their parents relaxed at home, they played in the garden.
George, let's go look for treasure.
They got carried away and dug too deep. Suddenly, they fell into some underground space. It resembled an underworld. Everything around exuded horror. Peppa and George walked along a dark corridor and emerged into a huge ritual hall. The room was lit by a red glow. Walls were draped with chains. Bones and skeletons lay scattered around, and in the center stood a table.
George, look! This must be a sacrificial altar.
Peppa, I think we should leave.
George muttered nervously.
Yes, right now.
Peppa said as if she had an idea, but George was already pulling her by the hand toward the exit. Suddenly, they realized they couldn't escape on their own.
Are we stuck here forever?
Don't cry. We'll figure something out.
Peppa said, and started calling for help. Their cries brought their parents running. They were furious, but helped the piglets get out. On the way home, Peppa enthusiastically told them about the ritual hall. Her excitement frightened George. Their parents just exchanged glances and laughed. That night, Peppa said,
George, I have something special.
She pulled a small bone from under her pillow. It was glowing with a bright green light.
Peppa, you're going to get into trouble.
George warned anxiously, but Peppa didn't listen and happily played with her find. Suddenly, the floor in the nursery cracked open into two parts, and from it emerged a gigantic skeleton with red eyes, a terrible smile, black claws, and red tentacles behind its back.
You stole my bone. You will pay for this,
it said in a demonic voice. The skeleton grabbed Peppa's hand and lifted her toward the ceiling. Meanwhile, Dad and Mom Pig were sitting in the living room reading books. Suddenly, Evie ran into the room.
Bear! Where is my bear, Mommy?
Honey, he's probably lost again among your toys. Let's go find him.
Mommy Pig picked up Evie in her arms, and they headed to her room. When they opened the door, they froze in horror. Everything in the room was upside down. Walls were scratched with claws, and in the middle of the room hung Bear on a rope with black crosses instead of eyes.
My bear!
Sweetheart, it's just some evil joke.
Mom said nervously. Suddenly, they heard wild screams from Peppa's and George's nursery. The room was in chaos. George was hanging in a net in the upper corner of the room with white eyes as if hypnotized. Peppa was standing against the wall with black eyes and a creepy smile. She was whispering some spell and scratching something on the wall with a bone. Dad Pig was lying on the floor and barely managed to say, "Run!" In the center stood an ominous skeleton. It turned toward the door and whispered in that same chilling demonic voice,
"Oh, we have guests. You're just in time. I just finished with these little pigs."
It all started like any other day. Daddy Pig was fixing a floorboard. Peppa, George, and Evie watched. Evie stared into the gap, silent, unmoving, eyes too wide.
"Don't go down there.
Daddy Pig said.
Just dust and spiders."
That night, Peppa woke up. Strange lights flickered under her door. She heard soft rustling. At the end of the hall, she saw Evie.
We're waiting.
In the living room, the rug was gone. In its place, a gaping hole. She stepped closer. Creak, crack. A hand grabbed her. She was pulled under the floor, into darkness, cold, whispering, laughter. Then a warped version of Evie's song. Peppa trembled. Evie stood before her, but twisted, taller, eyes hollow.
You came to play.
She whispered. Peppa backed away, touched something. She turned and saw Daddy Pig. His eyes were glowing. She ran. Hands reached out. Faces flickered. Ahead was a light. It was the silhouette of Mummy Pig. She climbed toward the light, and suddenly a white flash. She gasped in bed. In her room, she looked around, panting. Everything looked normal. She exhaled, nervously smiled. But then she looked up. Evie was on the ceiling, smiling. Deleted episode of Peppa Pig, The Secret Protector. It was an ordinary evening at Peppa Pig's house. Peppa was sitting in her room reading a book. Suddenly, George noticed a strange shadow appearing in the mirror by the window. George called out to Peppa, "Look, what is that?" Peppa approached and saw the silhouette of a monster. George was frightened and hid behind Peppa. At that moment, the shadow began to stretch out from the mirror and transform into a figure. A huge creature with red eyes, sharp teeth, long claws, and a tail. Peppa and George stepped back. The monster started to chase after them. It made terrifying sounds. It seemed no one could protect the little pigs. Peppa ran toward the door. Suddenly, the mirror cracked. A wave of dark energy burst out from the cracks. Everything in the room started glitching. Walls disappeared and reappeared, and the monster kept getting closer. George grabbed his favorite toy, a dinosaur, and shouted, "Help!" Suddenly, the toy in his hand began to move. The little dinosaur grew larger and roared, shielding the small pigs. The monster attacked him. They fought while Peppa and George cowered in the corner of the room, watching this battle with horror. Suddenly, everything went silent. "Dinosaurs!" George exclaimed joyfully. "You defeated the monster. Well done,"
My mission is complete now. Take care of yourself.
said the dinosaur before transforming back into an ordinary toy. At first, George was sad that the dinosaur was no longer alive. But during breakfast, he noticed the dinosaur winking at him, and George smiled. Now he knows that he is always protected. In the evening, Peppa went home, but the road veered off to the side. She saw familiar faces, Susie, Rebecca, Denny, and new ones, pale and motionless. In the center of the circle, a puddle of black liquid reflecting the sky, but distorted. They stood silently, waiting. Peppa slowly approached. Susie turned her head abruptly without blinking. Her eyes, empty sockets, a black drop at the corner of her mouth. All the children simultaneously turned their heads toward Peppa, synchronously, faces devoid of emotion. The puddle in the center of the circle pulsed, gentle ripples emanating from it. Peppa stepped back. The children reached their hands out at the same time, their fingers elongated, black liquid flowing from them. The children's mouths opened to an unnatural width, but silently. The puddle in the center suddenly stretched upward, forming a black tentacle reaching toward Peppa. Peppa ran. When she looked back, everything had disappeared. But it was worse. Numerous trails of black slime led in different directions. Some led to Peppa's gate. Someone left with her, or followed her. Midnight, Peppa sat on her bed, drawing a circle in her notebook. A shadow near the door began to change. It was the silhouette of one of the children from the circle. Beyond the door, the park. That very park. Children in a circle. She was among them, standing hand in hand with the others. If Peppa isn't with them, then who is in the circle? Her eyes became as empty as Susie's. She slowly smiled. Suddenly, a face, blurred, eye sockets empty, mouth twisted into a grin, black liquid dripping, darkness flooding everything. You are already standing in the circle. You just don't know it yet.